and our bars are full. So that is a wonderful thing. Secondly, our waterfront has been crumbling. We literally have piers that are falling into the ocean. And in recent years, we haven't figured out how we're going to find the $1 billion that we need to reinvest in our piers. We have an opportunity with the America's Cup to make sure that our waterfront rivals the best waterfronts around the world. That we are creating real beauty and bringing real community onto our waterfront. We're also going to have an opportunity to really invest in transit, to make sure that folks who live along the waterfront have access to public transit as other parts of the city do. Right now, if you've looked at the so-called People's Plan, which is the plan that our city is putting in place to take into account the thousands of folks, actually the hundreds of thousands of folks that will be coming, we're going to use this as an opportunity to build transit not just for 2012 and 2013, but for the future. Now, you can rest assured that any fears or rumors that we have sold away parcels are simply not true. We have a lot of protections in the America's Cup agreements. I spent, along with Gavin Newsom, along with many lawyers in Dennis Herrera's office, countless hours to make sure that that would be the case.
Ms. Rees has the next question, yes.
I'll ask my question to Terry. Picking up on what John Avalos was talking about related to community policing and building of relationships, my question to you has to do with foot patrols, which are another way to help strengthen the bonds of trust between the community and the residents. If more police are out in the neighborhoods, there's more open communication. So my question to you is, do you support foot patrols? And number two, what other measures are you thinking about to ensure safety in our neighborhoods?
I absolutely support a cop on the beat who's there long enough to get to know the neighborhood and long enough for the neighborhood to get to know the cop. I think that's an essential part of the police and the community working together, and we need to have more of those, and it's a shame that that's one of the first things that gets cut out of the budget. I also believe that neighborhood groups should have a say on the priorities of policing in their neighborhood. Do they want police to focus on people sitting and lying on the sidewalk? Do they want them to focus on trying to solve unsolved murders? We've got to get the neighborhood groups involved in speaking directly with the police about what their priorities are. Another thing I would do would be to replace ROTC with a program in the schools that was equivalent to a very well-developed neighborhood emergency response team, so that children in the schools were getting trained to help in emergencies, and this in turn would lead to them being part of the police and the fire departments, so that we would have a lot of local people in the police and fire departments. And this is another thing we need to have, both for the connection between the police and the neighborhoods, and in case of an emergency and when the bridges are down, we need to have those people living here already. Thank you.
The next question is from Mr. Chiu. Followed by Ms. Alioto-Pier.
Continuing on this theme around more effective policing, I'm going to ask a question of Dennis Herrera. We know that the Southeast neighborhoods have had far more crime than it ought to. You know that as a former police commissioner. I know that as someone who used to be a criminal prosecutor. I have spent way too I've spent way too much time here in these neighborhoods speaking to victims of crime who have shared with me their frustrations with not hearing from their police department, not hearing from police officers that are walking the beat who are not fully implementing community policing. We've had now several mayoral administrations that have not fully implemented what we've known for decades is effective about community policing. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in the Bayview at the Opera House, where there were several hundred members of the African American community that were extremely angry and frustrated after a 19-year-old African American was shot. We have to continue to build more trust, and let me raise one other issue that I hope you might be able to touch upon. We now have a lot of criminal justice agencies that are not working together. 11 years ago, there was an immigrant woman named Claire Tampaho who was murdered after several criminal justice agencies did not share data about the information they knew about her husband who was slowly beating her to death. We do not have a coordinated database system. It has been 11 years. This system was supposed to take a couple of years and cost a couple $1 million. It is now $23 million and running. And unfortunately, Mayor Ed Lee's administrator does not know when this project is going to be done and how this budget is going to be closed. Dennis, I'd like you to talk about what you would do to move forward a law enforcement agenda if you were mayor.
Thank you, David. First, let me just tell you right off the bat, I think Greg Sir is an excellent choice for police chief. I had the good fortune of working with him when I was on the police commission. I served as president for 3 of the 4 years that I was on there in the late 90s. And if you look back to that, it was when Chief Fred Lau was there. We lived community policing. It was not just a phrase. And what you're talking about is a disconnect and a lack of trust that people have with the police department and with officers on the beat. I'm going to give you some examples. When I was on the police commission, we put in groundbreaking rules with respect to how the department would deal with the issue of racial profiling, how we would handle transgender individuals that came into custody, that we had mandatory roll call trainings of our police officers to make sure that they were staying up on whatever the latest trend or issue was. Those kind of things, working with the community, build trust. And building trust is how you get results in the San Francisco Police Department. We have gotten away from that level of involvement at the police commission level and in terms of what we demand vis-a-vis community involvement. I have every confidence in the world that Chief Greg Sir will do a great job. We do need accountability. I will tell you on the Timpango case, you are correct. We have dealt with that with the lack of coordination between city departments for a decade, and I've had to defend the litigation that has come out of it. It comes up to mayoral leadership in terms of demanding community involvement, working with your police chief to let him do his job or her job as a professional, and making sure city departments are coordinated.
Next question is from Ms. Alioto-Pier, followed by Mr. Herrera.
Thank you, Tony. My question is for Bevan Dufty. Before I left the Board of Supervisors, I passed legislation that I know you voted for. You may have actually co-sponsored it. But it requires 100% testing of all rape kits in San Francisco. Up until that point, we had not tested all of our rape kits, in most cases because women knew their perpetrator, and so we didn't test it. But what we found in New York City was that when we tested 100% of the rape kits, we had a 70% increase in conviction and ultimate incarceration. What other things will you do to help women who have crimes who are put against them?
Thank you. I think one of the most important things is having a police department that looks like our city. So I certainly want to see women continue to rise to the leadership ranks within San Francisco Police Department. I also want to speak to the fact that we do need to use best training and best practices, and we have had, under George Gascon for his 1.5 years, he did do a good job of getting the department to do things that hadn't been done before. And I'm a big supporter of Greg Sir's as chief. But I do want to say, we can talk ourselves blue in the face, but until people's promotional opportunities are tied to community policing, we will not see meaningful community policing. The reality is, you get asked a couple of questions when you interview to become a sergeant or become a lieutenant. There is no quantifiable measure that is applied to officers seeking to promote. And I think until that happens, you're not going to see things meaningfully change. And obviously, we need to continue to focus on our crime lab and make sure that it is run efficiently and effectively and respects what we need to be doing. Thank you.
Mr. Herrera, followed by Mr. Avalos for a question.
My question is to Michela Alioto-Pier, and I know that, Michela, you've spent a great deal of time on community involvement when it comes to healthcare with St. Luke's. In this community here in Potrero, we are sandwiched between two hospital development projects, UCSF and San Francisco General. And I'm a big believer in the General, and in terms of its mission, it is a great place. With those two hospitals, how do we guarantee that there will be community involvement in the planning process and in terms of the care that is provided to make sure that it's benefiting the surrounding community?
Thank you, Mr. Herrera. Well, as a member of the Board of Supervisors, in representing the neighborhoods that I represented, CPMC had 3 of their 5 campuses within District 2, the Cathedral Hill site, California, and Pacific. And so I had approached Supervisor Amiano at the time. They were in the process of closing down St. Luke's, and I had wanted to try and save it not only because of the impact it would have on San Francisco General, but also from a disaster relief perspective, we have to have healthcare on this side of town. We pulled together what became known as the Blue Ribbon Panel, myself along with Mitch Katz, who was then the head of our public health department, Marty Brutman, who was the head of CPMC, and a man named Bishop Andrus from Grace Cathedral. And when we did it, we pulled together the Blue Ribbon, which were all of the experts in healthcare, and then we also had a community task force that was also assigned. They started the work before the Blue Ribbon, and they were the people who came to every Blue Ribbon panel meeting and told us where the community was and how the community felt. We ultimately ended up with a hospital and a $250 million commitment from CPMC to rebuild St. Luke's. We had many discussions about what would happen with St. Luke's, and we're still having those conversations. We still need at least 70 more SNF beds. We still need a NICU in St. Luke's Hospital. But what we know is that by having St. Luke's where it is, we relieve huge pressure off of San Francisco General. Without it, San Francisco General would be working at 150% capacity, and so the need for St. Luke's is a very real one.
Mr. Avalos has the last question.
This is a question for Joanna Rees, and related to livable communities. In the southern part of San Francisco, District 10 and District 11, we have a huge problem with blight, and we have a huge problem with illegal dumping as well. And the city has not had an adequate response in these districts to really deal with the blight issue of properties that are not cared for, that become havens for bad things happening. Also, we have illegal dumping, and it's very different from District 10, District 11. Can you talk about what kind of ways that you would help to resolve this issue?
Yeah, so there's a lot of disparity in our communities by neighborhood, and I spent a lot of time walking merchant corridors in District 10 and District 11 and going door to door in District 10 and District 11, and it becomes incredibly prevalent. So I guess I would say, first of all, it just starts with that's absolutely unacceptable, that we can't have these disparities in the community. And this is back to what I said earlier, that it's often the person with the loudest voice or money and influence who gets attention, and we forget about this silent majority of people who are living in situations where there's an empty lot next to them. I know when I was going door to door in the Bayview, there was a known crack house that the neighbors told me they've been calling the police on and nothing's being done. And we need to absolutely, it's just back to, again, a zero tolerance policy. The one thing that, when I first moved here, what motivated me about San Francisco was the unique character of our different neighborhoods, and I feel like this is also something that we're losing. We're losing it in specifically even just in merchant corridors down in Crocker Amazon and in the Excelsior, where again merchants are really subject to so many additional licenses and permits, to the point where I talk to merchants who tell me I no longer have any employees anymore. It's just us running the business because we can't afford to. And I think we need to make sure that we're really focused on these communities and also really tapping into our entrepreneurial community here and creating local economic empowerment. Bevan was talking about just even plants in the Bayview. There's a lot of opportunity to create local entrepreneurs and have them be the ones who thrive, tapping into the entrepreneurial talent we have in the community.
And that finishes round 4 of questions. Thank you, candidates, for all the give and take.